Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah with the Midwest Writing Center, and it is Banned Books Week. Tomorrow is the last day of Banned Books Week, and I would have loved to give you this whole introduction description of Banned Books Week before our reading, which was last night, but I was at a conference and unavailable to do a Write More Light video on Tuesday, so you're getting it today. This is unfortunate because it means that you missed our, well, maybe you didn't, but many of you missed our reading last night, our celebration of banned books. And it was awesome. It was a really, really excellent time. And it always is. It seems, I think, on the outside, like it'll be weird or boring. And maybe it is weird, but because we get together and we have people talk about their favorite banned books rather than their own work, which is what we normally do. We normally have original texts, but to see people who are passionate about literature or passionate about ideas, passionate about the First Amendment, talk about why they care and what books they love and what books they love that are challenged or banned is a really, really special experience. And we did have, we had a pretty good crowd last night. I was really excited about that. Just people who are involved and excited about literature, freedom of expression. So I'm gonna read from maybe I'll pull it up. I'm gonna read from the ALA, that's the American Library Association's page on banned books, to give you a little background information on Banned Books Week. So here we go. Banned Books Week celebrates the freedom to read and spotlight current events and historical attempts to censor books in libraries and schools. For 40 years, the annual event has brought together the entire book community, librarians, booksellers, publishers, journalists, teachers, and readers of all types, in shared support of the freedom to seek and to express ideas, even those some consider unorthodox or unpopular. The books featured during Banned Books Week have all been targeted for removal or restriction in libraries and schools. By focusing on efforts across the country to remove or restrict access to books, Banned Books Week draws national attention to the harms of censorship. In a time of intense political polarization, library staff in every state are facing unprecedented number of attempts to ban books. ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 729 challenges to library, school, and university materials and services in 2021, resulting in more than 1,597 individual book challenges or removals. Most targeted books were by or about Black or LGBTQIA+ persons. The theme for Banned Books Week in 2022 is Books Unite Us, Censorship Divides Us. I think that's always the theme. Sharing stories important to us means sharing a part of ourselves. Books reach across boundaries and build connections between readers. Censorship, on the other hand, creates barriers. Banned Books Week is both a reminder of the unifying power of stories and the divisiveness of censorship, a call to action for readers across the country to push back against censorship attempts in their communities. Books are still being banned and challenged today. A challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict materials based on the objections of a person or group. A banning is the removal of those materials. While books have been and continue to be banned, part of Banned Books Week's celebration is the fact that, in the majority of cases, books have remained available. This happens only thanks to the efforts of librarians, teachers, students, and community members who stand up and speak out for the freedom of reading, the freedom to read. Goodness, I was hoping we could talk about, yes, okay, so now I'm going to share my screen. Hi, baby. Carter also believes in freedom of expression. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So this is the top 10 most challenged book list. Maybe I should kick you out. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, this is exactly what I hoped for. Usually I have pulled this up in advance, but I did not have that foresight, but it was exactly where I thought it was. So we're doing fine. Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. And what we're looking for, what I'm excited about sharing here is the reason these things are banned, and we'll go into why that matters in a moment. Banned, challenged, and restricted for queer content and because it was considered to have sexually explicit images. Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison, banned and challenged for queer content and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. All Boys Aren't Blue, banned and challenged for queer content, profanity, and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez, banned, challenged, and restricted for depictions of abuse and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, banned and challenged for profanity, violence, and because it was thought to promote anti-police messaging and indoctrination of a social agenda. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, banned and challenged for profanity, sexual references, and use of derogatory terms. Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews, banned and challenged because it was considered sexually explicit and degrading to women. Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl was read last night at our event by librarian Angela Campbell. So I was really concerned I got her name wrong for a second. And it was so much fun. I've seen the movie, I haven't read the book. It was just so much fun. Angela is obviously a great reader. I guess maybe that's not obvious if you don't know her, but she's a great reader. But also she talked about like there's no degrading women in the book. What's happening is there's a teenage narrator, right? In fact, hi, sweetie, in the excerpt that she shared, we got the thoughts of the narrator, who's a teenage boy, trying not to be sexist. So like, pretty silly. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, banned and challenged because it depicts child sexual abuse and was considered sexually explicit. This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Banned, challenged, relocated and restricted for providing sexual education and queer content. Beyond Magenta by Susan Kirkland, banned and challenged for queer content because it was considered to be sexually explicit. So what's really interesting about this, there's a couple of things. We're seeing a lot of, and I have replaced LGBTQIA+ with the word queer, which is an umbrella term that was definitely considered a slur for a long time and has come back into vogue. But what's fun is like, Jason Reynolds is all over this list. So that was 2021 that we just looked at. But some of these are picture books. Some of these are old. Speak came out in 1999. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian came out, I want to say earlier than that, still in the 90s. To Kill a Mockingbird came out in the 60s. Of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men and the Bluest Eye, we know are not new books. But one of the other reasons that books are banned, I mean, well, we'll talk about what a reason is, but one of the other reasons books are banned that we saw come up a few times yesterday. Oh, and that was probably under the Speak one. Let me look at that. I'm scrolling down, you can't see it. Okay, Speak was banned, challenged, and restricted because it was thought to contain a political viewpoint, and it was claimed to be biased against male students. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that everyone knows that you can dislike or portray a single person in an unsavory light without hating all people who have anything in common with them. I've read some of these books. I certainly haven't read them all. But what we're seeing is books that deal with marginalized people in a favorable way are books that people don't want us to read. Of course, there is this idea that is somehow very pervasive, that if we see people different from ourselves, we will become like them. Now, one, that's bananas. But more importantly, it's really, really important that we experience lives different from our own. And that's one of the reasons that we read. Reading improves empathy. We know that. Studies have been done. And experiencing a world outside of our own bodies is really important to becoming a better person. Now, I know I just said that it improves, increases empathy, but if we're expected to exist in a world in which not everything is homogenized, we need to be able to understand other people's experiences. And it's through art that happens. And that doesn't have to be books. That's also movies. That's also music and TV, visual art, advertisements. But without that, we will have a hard time dealing with life in the world. More than that, part of, I think, what a lot of people are scared about in regard to gender inclusivity, but also probably sexuality inclusivity, is that we're giving, when we make available literature and art that shows the great variety of people who exist in the world, people stop feeling so alone, and that saves lives. That goes for any kind of marginalized people, but particularly for people who go through the world feeling really lost. And we talked about this last night. To learn that there's a word for what they are and that they're not the only person experiencing whatever phenomena has, and there are studies on this too, has the incredible impact of saving lives. So books matter, but it's also really scary that people want to stop that. We know, we've seen this over and over again, the people who are trying to ban books are not the same people who are reading those books. That's a big red flag. And there's also an important couple of side notes that weren't acknowledged in that bit that I read from the American Library Association, which is banning books is less about the content of the book than it is about control over what thoughts and expressions are available to us. And when we have a limited source of art, content, viewpoints available to us, and a limited variety of expression available to us, we're easier to control, and we are much less happy. We already know that, because I said it 1 second ago, we already know that having visibility, having representation saves lives. We already know that. So when we take it away, what we have left is unhappy people, fewer people, and people unwilling to look outside of themselves. And that's one of the reasons that public education is so important. We put all kinds of people in a room to learn all kinds of content and learn about each other and learn about the world. And that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't think that anyone's going to be watching this video who thinks that censorship is cool, but it's also important for me to remind anyone who maybe lives in the US and has total faith in the First Amendment. First Amendment is freedom to speech, freedom of speech, but it also protects your right to assemble, freedom of the press. Oh, there are 5 First Amendment rights, and we're going to see if my high school journalism is still with me. Okay, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression. I don't think religion is covered here, but it might be. Maybe I'll take up your time. 5 First Amendment rights. Okay. Petition, freedom freedom of petition. So, okay, I was right. Religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition are all protected by the First Amendment. And so banning books is really hard to do because that falls under the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But it is still possible. And it's also state censorship exists, state meaning government. Censorship exists all over the world, and it's happening now, right now, for a variety of reasons. We saw that the book Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson's definitely the last name. It was censored or challenged because it contained a political viewpoint. And I don't know anything about the author's political viewpoints. I read the book a couple decades ago, I think. So I also don't know what like potential political agenda it's maybe supposedly pushing. That book is about a victim of sexual violence. I can't think of anyone who is okay with that. So I can't imagine how that could be a political agenda. But that's important. It's important to realize that this is happening here and now, but also on a much grander level. Governments throughout the world are able to and successfully censor literature, and other forms of media, of course. And while our Constitution protects that, our Bill of Rights protects that, that doesn't mean that there aren't lots of ways around it. And that's why we celebrate banned books, because we have the access to them and we want to maintain the access to them. So along with that, of course, I want to thank every librarian, every journalist, every activist who protects First Amendment rights. But also, we can't ask them to carry this burden alone. We need to be engaging in these conversations with whoever crosses our path that may think that some book that they hate should be censored, or that children are too young to read something, because children self-select the art that they take in, and if they're too young, they're not going to understand. I think if you don't remember being a child or being a teenager, here is your reminder that you had the same thoughts and feelings then that kids are having today, and that includes thoughts about racial justice, thoughts about gender and sexuality, thoughts about swear words and religion and authority. And you knew those things existed, and no one shut that down. And that's really, really important. It's important to remember that, because when we try to stop kids from expanding the art that they consume and expanding their minds and expanding their social circles, we're stopping them from developing, just period. And it's also only going to make them dislike you and distrust you. So it's a bad move altogether. But another area of censorship that is not addressed by the excerpt I read from the American Library Association is censorship in the carceral populations, so in prisons and jails and detention centers, and to some extent shelters, though much less. And that's not something I'm actually prepared to talk about right now, but it is something important to consider, that most censorship that is done in this country is done in the carceral system. The librarians and thank you to all librarians. The librarians in prisons and in jails do really wonderful, really excellent work with the materials that they're given. But a lot of things are censored from jails and prisons that deal with the concept of freedom, and the concept of hope. So it's not necessarily like books on how to lead a life of crime, right? It's books about, having a better tomorrow. I know there are some things that are censored in certain not populations, in certain institutions that maybe not censored. There are books that are not in certain places, right? We don't have pornography in high school libraries, usually. Because we don't want people engaging with that in public. That's totally different from not allowing people to engage with thoughts outside of their own. I just want to put that out there. I think this is all, and I want to thank, of course, Ryan Collins, our director at the Midwest Writing Center, for putting forth these ideas last night, and all of our readers last night who brought beautiful literature and beautiful explanations of their experience with censorship. So I'm going to now tell you who read with us, what they read, and a little bit about what they said. But this video is also, the video of our reading last night is also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Midwest Writing Center. So you can have the full experience. And there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of joy last night. But in case you're for some reason sitting here with me and not watching that video, let me see if I have any questions. Nope. Okay. Readers, I don't have this in front of me. I apologize, friends. Readers included Emily Kingery, John Turner, Jenna Isbell, Sophia Rivers, Angela Campbell, Lisa Lockhart, Kate Ferentz, and Ethan Wynn. May have forgotten one person. And the books that we saw last night, Ethan read Mouse, which of course, I think I say of course, and I think it's really unfair of me to say of course. Mouse is a graphic novel about the Holocaust. I want to say that its primary motivations, no, I don't know any of the motivations of people who censor books. I cannot understand that on any level. But the cited reasons that that book is censored is for female nudity and hey, sweetie. Female nudity and political agenda, which is really scary. Sorry about that, which is really scary, right? First of all, it is a mouse that is nude. So take that information. But second of all, if we don't tell these stories, we are more likely to fall victim to repeating them. That's factual. And also, if we don't depict them with honesty, we aren't going to understand the full breadth of the atrocity. I already said Angela Campbell read Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, and it was hilarious. I also read The Reasons to already, why that was censored. Emily Kingery brought us the picture book from the 30s, Ferdinand, which is about a bull who liked to laze around and did not want to participate in bullfighting. And the reasons for the censorship that Emily gave us were wide-ranging and very silly. I hope that you will look it up if you aren't familiar with the book, but also look it up to see the variety of reasons that folks thought it should be censored. It's a picture book. She read the entire thing to us. It was very fun, and it was also a picture book. Sophia Rivers read to us Sex is a Funny Word, which is a sex ed book for children. And Sophia read the intro for parents, which I'm very grateful for, because it shows really without any doubt that the folks who are banning books are not engaging with them, because this full intro for parents is for parents. It says, read this before you read the book with your children. Here's how to use this book, and here's why. And I mean, what else can you ask for when trying to teach children anything, teach anyone anything? Jenna Isbell talked to us about a textbook that was censored in their, which was a textbook that was used in their high school, but the reasons for banning the book were not that it was a low quality book, but because it depicted art. And when I say art, I mean David by Michelangelo and Venus by Botticelli. So like old-timey classic art from the great intellectual periods of history. But what Jenna did end up reading to us was Pigman, which, I don't remember the reasons that it was banned. I haven't read it. But it was a book important to their development as a person and their childhood. We had, Melissa Conway. That's the other person who read. Melissa Conway read to us from the graphic novel Genderqueer. Lisa Lockhart read Whale Talk, which is by Chris Crutcher. I remember when I was in school, that one was being banned, and all of Chris Crutcher's work seemed to be really exciting people when I was in, I don't know, junior high maybe. And well, I don't need to get into it all. I hope that you will watch our video from last night. It was really, really wonderful. And I hope that you'll look into reading more banned works. We can tell a lot about the world. We can learn a lot about the world based on what is being banned. I had a conversation with someone recently. A song bleeped out a racial slur, and maybe it was a TV show. It was a TV show. It was the show Quantum Leap, which is getting a reboot, I guess. But there's an episode, there are several episodes that deal with racial violence on Quantum Leap, and they had bleeped out all uses of racial slurs. And the conversation that I had with this person was about why you want to do that on TV instead of replacing the word. And I bring this up because this was a big deal a few years ago with Huckleberry Finn. And using any other word in place of slurs leads us to believe that these words are equal in meaning, even if they are not equal in intent. And that is a really, really harmful thing to do, because there are no words that are on the level with slurs. That's why slurs are used. Words have power. And if we are going to try to be more sensitive by using slurs less frequently in the media, specifically in, say, Huckleberry Finn or Quantum Leap, we need to also educate our audience on why we're not using this word and not replace it, not pretend that some other word was used there when no other word has the power of that word or those words. I'm not talking about necessarily a single slur. There are so many slurs out there for so many different populations. And I think it is important and powerful to move forward in this world without using harmful language. But the right thing to do is not to replace harmful language with less harmful language and pretend that that's the same, because that just teaches people that either the harmful language isn't that bad or that it is on par with other words. And we need to respect the history of words if we're going to use them, if they have power. If we want to live in a world where we have freedom of expression, we need to respect language and all that it can do. And sometimes what it can do is damage. Now, I also want to say, for books that are censored for use of slurs, I have to operate under the assumption that context is not looked into. These books, in my experience, and I have read a lot of books, these books do not promote the use of harmful language. These books show how harmful language can be. And we live in a world in which our communication is based on language. So it is very important to engage with language. We know I'm biased. We know that all the work that I do is about language and in service of language. But I'm still right. Words are powerful, and words are the tool of communication that we use the most. They're not the only tool of communication, and they don't need to be the only tool of communication. But words are specific, and words have meaning, and we need to respect them as such and use them as such, and not waffle around them. That's another reason to the power of language, that censorship has the potential to be so powerful. We see most of the time that the folks, I've already said this, that the folks who want to ban books are not the same folks who are reading those books. And a lot of the time, I think if one were willing to engage with the art that they're trying to ban, their opinion would change. But there are a couple of options. Either they hate the book and they think nobody's going to want this crap. It didn't convince me, it won't convince you, whatever. Or they realize that nothing harmful is going on here. We're learning. The idea of, something like Speak, which I said was about a victim of sexual violence, being banned is kind of absurd to me. No, I have read it. I read it as a teenager, I think. And it's a really powerful story. It did not give me any political ideas. It did not make me hate men. It made me have empathy for our narrator, who's going through a lot. And what she's going through is not unique. And that is so beneficial. One, for when you inevitably interact with someone whose story is like this, and two, in case your story is like this. There's a lot of power in knowing that you are not alone. I've gotten really emotional in this talk today, and I maybe haven't been my most eloquent of all time, this is a really important topic, and I hope that you will engage with it. Even, I mean, I think it's unlikely that you have made it 40 minutes into this video if you think that I'm a fool, but even if you don't agree with me or you have different thoughts, which is possible, I don't speak for everyone, ever. It's still always important to read outside of the comfort zone. I say that all the time when I give writing advice, when I give advice for existing in the world. And this came up last night. We had a couple of people reading ebooks. Books are books. Whatever it is, whatever format, the media that tells stories that you engage with counts. If you're a podcast person, if you're a movie person, if you're a music person, whatever it is, this counts. We don't want any art to be censored. And it's a wild, slippery slope when you look into, how big art, expensive art gets made, and where funding comes from and stuff. It gets really, it's a weird thing to look into. I'm not really recommending looking into it, but you can. Maybe you should. I don't know. I don't know you. I'm glad that I have, but it gets really confusing living in a world in which you have the freedom of speech, but maybe not the freedom of dissemination. Dissemination is spreading information. So I have a cat on my right hand. My right hand is the hand that I write with. But I am going to give you some updates on the Midwest Writing Center as best I can with no calendar. And then we will do a free write whether or not my hand is free. Okay. So next Monday, we have a reading at the Bettendorf Public Library from our anthology, These Interesting Times, Surviving 2020 in the Quad Cities. That's, I believe it's 7 p.m. I really hope that I am not wrong. I think it's 7 to 8 p.m. At the Bettendorf Public Library. It'll be featuring Jonathan Turner, Joe Chambers, and Monica Flink, all of whom have really beautiful. Joe is a poet. I think that he wrote poetry in the anthology. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they all have really beautiful stories. They're all really talented writers, and it's going to be a beautiful event. And an intimate one. It's nice. A lot of the time we have a ton of readers and it's really fun, but it's also really nice to have a small reading where you can really get to know the readers, and there'll be a Q&A. And, we all experienced 2020, so there'll be plenty going on. Excuse me. That was unexpected. On October 2nd, there'll be a resistance poetry. I don't know off the top of my head what's happening on October 2nd. I apologize. No, I'm correct. Sorry again. On October 2nd, there will be a resistance poetry reading at the German American Heritage Center. And that same day is Lowland Block Party, which is at the labor space between Roz Talks and Ragged Records on 3rd Avenue in Rock Island. At Lowland Block Party, the Midwest Writing Center will have a couple of readers. There'll be live music all day. There'll be a little tiny street fair. And obviously, Roz Talks will have food and drink for sale. It was a really wonderful time last year, and it'll be a really wonderful time this year. On October 8th, we will be at Iowa City Book Fest, and also it's the rain date for the Youth Arts Festival. So we will be there. We will have readers from our Young Emerging Writers. There will be lots of really excellent art going on. Coming up beyond that date, my memory is less good, but we will have the return of our brown bag lunches with local authors. Jonathan Turner has one. Salvador Marici has one. And then Sal has a workshop coming up in which he teaches building tension in your writing. Salvatore Marici is a beautiful, beautiful poet and a really fun guy. And I'm excited to get back to workshopping personally. There is still a cat on my right hand, so I'm going to set this timer and maybe maybe right on my phone. We'll see how it works. For our free write today, I would like for you to write about or write into whatever form the writing happens for you is fine. Um, or write into censoring or censorship, whatever that means to you in this moment. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to talk about my favorite banned book, though that's cool. But it can be, a story around someone who has been cut off or deplatformed, or, a poem about feeling censored, whatever it is. 5 minutes starts now. I am not someone who writes on their phone, really ever. This is weird for me. One minute, 20 seconds. didn't jump that time because I'm holding the phone. Uh, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Please go out in your life and read and write more light into your life.